And I started realizing I am telling myself to think about the worst. No one else is telling me to believe that. I'm telling myself to believe the worst, and it's making me miserable. Well, if I'm telling myself that I have to believe the worst, why can't I tell myself to believe the best?
Welcome back to Good Business. Guys, I'm so excited to have my co-host James Hall here and Chad Barrett as a special guest today. Guys, we as entrepreneurs and leaders, we face so many challenges and struggles, and we deal with things like imposter syndrome. We feel like failures nonstop, and it's a tough world out there. The latest statistic that I was looking up today was 1 in 3 entrepreneurs face thoughts of depression and suicide within the last 2 weeks or month, something along those lines. Either way, it is tough for entrepreneurs, and we're going to talk about how to deal with anxiety, how to deal with depression as a leader. And as you guys know, in this show, we don't hold back from the real talk about business leadership. We're not trying to just say, hey, it's all about the numbers, because honestly, it's not. The numbers are an indicator of success or failure, but it is just one of many. And so first and foremost, we're going to focus today on what does it look like to be a healthy leader. And I'd love it if, Chad, you could start out by introducing yourself and sharing who you are. What's your background? And if you want to kind of talk a little bit about the influence that you're bringing to the world around you, that'd be great.
Yeah. Well, first of all, thanks for having me. It's an honor to be on the Good Business podcast with you guys today.
Yeah,
I feel flattered.
happy to have you.
Name is Chad Barrett. I grew up in redneck country, southwest Louisiana, milking cows when I was a kid and all that good stuff. And I'm one of the pastors at Fellowship Church at Plum Creek. I get to oversee small groups and develop teams like that and make sure they're all healthy and everything. And been married for 27 years, have 4 kids. My oldest is 24. Then I have Christina, who passed away of cancer 9 years ago. Mm. She would be 21. And then we have Caroline, who just turned 18. And we had her daddy-daughter date last Saturday, a great skydive.
Right. Oh,
she
that's
did
awesome.
her,
yeah, I saw the skydiving video. That looks so much fun.
Her skydive on her 18th birthday, or a couple of days after that.
How did Mom feel about that?
We're still together.
yeah, still together.
We're still together. Yeah.
Still married.
Yeah.
Still married.
Yeah. No, I've been doing that for about 9 years, so she's kind of gotten a little bit over that. But,
yeah, that's good.
Yeah. Then we have my youngest is Catherine. She's 14 and loves volleyball and all that kind of good stuff. But yeah, my story is, guys, talking about. I mean, that's just such a sad statistic. 1 in 3.
It is.
And I mean, I know what anxiety and depression is. I battled it. I mean, I was riddled with it for years. Back in the day, they didn't know what anxiety attack, a panic attack was. I just, having this tremble and feel like the ground is going to fall underneath me. I didn't know what that was. But I battled anxiety and depression for many years. My story in a nutshell, and we'll get into it, but then August 2010, my daughter Christina was diagnosed with a rare cancer called clear cell sarcoma. 4 years later, she passed away, so she's with Jesus now. And here I am 9 years later, and I don't have anxiety or depression anymore. I haven't had it in 7 years. I'm not on medication. I'm not against medication. There's a time and a place for it, and Jesus is the center of the whole story. And so that's my story in a nutshell. And what I get the most joy out of life is, inspiring and equipping other people to learn how to overcome their obstacles and go further than they ever thought that they could go. And there's a lot that holds back in anxiety and depression. Is two of the biggest things that often go hand in hand. You know, I mean, for me, it was a cycle. I would battle anxiety. If it felt like I was trying to tread water in the middle of a stormy ocean, And that's what anxiety felt like. And then after a while, I'd just get exhausted and sink into depression. And then I would come back up in anxiety and depression. And, it affected my family, affected my job performance. But things are different now.
Yeah.
A lot different.
Well, let me ask you a quick question real quick, Chad, while we're discussing on the subject. I mean, you definitely put that in a nutshell. I really appreciate that. And just sitting here listening to you say it changes me. It's a journey the Lord's taking you on. And to be here and to say, hey, Jesus is at the center of this these storms that you've walked through. I'm kind of curious for for people who are listening, these business leaders. I imagine that they resonate with this, like very, very really. They feel it. And so, what would you share with somebody who's who's listening now about the impact that your journey has had in relationship to how you lead now as a leader of people, and kind of the relationship there, because your story is hard, and it takes resilience, to be there. And like you mentioned, Jesus is involved. I'd love to hear kind of how that connects to how you lead people now, maybe differently than you did before.
Well, every organization, James, is made up of people, not projects, not programs, not systems. A system only works if people are in place in it.
Yeah.
And the health of any organization is in direct relation to the health of the people involved. So leadership is influence. And, when we talked about that 1 in 3 of entrepreneurs, in each organization there are people that are struggling. And I would venture to say that it's not just the entrepreneurs. They have reason to struggle with with anxiety and depression. But when you read the articles and see the news, with anxiety and depression is prominent in many people. So my approach to leadership now is, I've worked for many leaders over the years, and some good-willed, some not. And some believe that leadership is, hey, I just need to bark out the orders, and they just need to follow me.
Yeah.
Or some say I'm a leader because I like taking charge, But you can take charge, and if there's no one following you, who are you leading? But leadership is about influence, and I look at it as a way, as a leader, if I can connect with the people that I lead and build a bridge, a relationship bridge, because we're all created by relationship for relationship.
Amen.
And if I can build that relationship bridge, then I can carry across truth to them that they would be more accepting of it, and they will follow. If they know that I care about them as a person more than I care about their performance as an employee, then their performance is going to increase on that.
Yeah.
And so one of the ways that I do that is one of the biggest ways that one of the biggest things that a leader can be most effective is just listening, asking questions and listening, getting to know his or her employees and finding out what is life like. And you may not be the best counselor in the world, but if you find out what life is like, what is the struggle at home, and when the employee is heard and cared for and still loved, because that's what everybody wants, to be known and to be loved. And when the employee is known and loved, then the likelihood is that he or she is going to follow that leader. So leadership is influence, and that's one of the things I really learned through this.
Oh, well, I appreciate you sharing that. I agree with you. So I have been what I would refer to as the jerk boss at some points in my life when I was younger. Thought I was the
All-American football
I thought I was
star.
the coolest thing since forever.
Yeah. Don't you know who I am?
Yeah. You walked in a room and you're like, you are all of you beneath me, to quote a funny character. Anyway, no, and a lot of times people, they almost believe that that's how they should be, because they've, especially when they're put into a leadership position, they're like, I need to be like this now because all of a sudden I've been put into this role. When probably the reality is that who they were before is actually what people are wanting in a leader, someone who cares, someone who does listen, right?
Mm-hmm.
And my father-in-law is always telling me, God gave us 2 ears and 1 mouth, so that's about the way we should use it.
Yeah, yeah.
And I'm like, I agree 100%.
That ratio is what is required.
It is,
Yeah.
and it's incredible how many times
Yeah.
people don't use their ears and instead use
James
their mouth.
chapter 1, 19 and 20, be slow to speak, quick to listen.
Yep.
Absolutely.
And it's just so much truth in that. It's so effective.
Yeah, no, I completely agree. Well, I'm kind of curious, the relationship that you have in regards to you do lead people, and like you said, listening and influencing people is how you basically are able to motivate them to fulfill a mission, maybe even a vision. So I'd love to kind of hear, in light of your past and your story, talking about instilling vision into people, and in regards to at some point we do have to say something. So how maybe have you changed over the years from how you maybe used to cast vision in leadership, and then shifting into today and how you do it now? I'd love to hear kind of your journey on that. Because I've changed a lot in the way I cast vision. I used to just write it all on a board and here's the vision.
I like it. How come you don't?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, I wrote it perfectly. Like
Yeah.
Moses with the coming out of the mountain. I was like, here's the vision.
Right.
And but we don't do that anymore, do we?
Well, vision can be a scary thing because if you're an entrepreneur, you have this vision of grandiose. I want to start a franchise, or I want to, I want to go this far, and so casting that vision can often exacerbate what people are already feeling, and that's what I call the 3 terrorists: fear, shame, and guilt. And they don't just happen at home. We bring them to work, and so fear. I liken them to I personify them. I think of tall, dark-figured, wearing a dark hoodie, and you can't see their face, and I'll tell you why later. But fear whispers to you, and they whisper lies that you're going to die if you try. Mm-hmm. You're not going to make this. Something bad's going to happen, so you might as well give up. There's no hope. Shame says you're not valued. You talked about the imposter syndrome. That's shame. Yeah. You're not good enough. They're going to find out who you really are. So just back off, just quit, just give up, And the guilt says you're dirty, you're rotten. I know what you did last night, So you're not accepted, you're not approved. So you might as well give up. So people are already battling those things, and so is the leader. But when the leader starts speaking truth into his or her people, helping to identify what those lies are and replacing those lies with truth, then things begin to change. So when we're talking about casting a vision, I want to cast a vision, and I want to tell my people, I believe in you, and I know you can do this because I've gotten to know you on a personal level. We're connected heart to heart. I know who your family is. I know what your background is. I know what your history, and you know what my story is, and my background and my history. I know your struggles. I know your fears, and I know what ails you. But I love you just the way you are, and I have total confidence that together as a team we can accomplish this together. So it's building into the lives, and it's speaking truth into their lives, but it starts with that heart-to-heart connection. There's a whole lot more than just barking out orders and taking charge and, guys, we're going this way, and if you're not following, then I'm fire you and get somebody else, Big difference in the two.
Wow. So, the wisdom there, it's profound. And not trying to inflate your ego at all, but it's so true.
Well, it didn't originate with me.
Well, and I think from everything that you're sharing, like that wisdom could only come through experience. Through that understanding could only come through experience. You can say what you just said until you're blue in the face, but I can tell that you believe it, and it's in the heart of hearts. So what James and I in business, obviously, we hire a lot of people, and we work with a lot of people. We probably hired, 200 people, 300 people, including contractors over the years.
Oh, yeah.
And so when I think about those hires, the people that tend to be the most successful are the ones who have gone through something hard in life, because those people have a better idea of what their identity is, and they have a better idea of what their strengths and weaknesses are. Mm-hmm. And so you obviously have gone through hardship. I'm going to get teary-eyed just thinking about the thought of losing a child. Can you walk me through that journey if you're open
Absolutely.
to it? From the moment that you guys got that diagnosis until the moment you realized, okay, I'm healthy. I mean, from what you just said, that's I think you said that's a 6-year journey, and we have 30 minutes here. But I mean, what was that journey like?
Okay.
So that I think going back to the imposter syndrome, that shame, I think so many entrepreneurs and leaders and people in general, they're sucked into social media, and all they see is, hey, this is the best life now, and all they're seeing is, hey, this is my worst life right now. And they don't quite see the path that it takes to actually get to your best life now. And so I'd love to know, what was that path like for you? So just to give some confidence to people going through hard times right now.
Yeah. So, it was August 23rd, 2010. Wow. And whenever we got the phone call from Dr. Thompson at Texas Children's Hospital in Houston, he said, Mr. and Mrs. Barrett, I need you to sit down. And we've already run tests on her. Long story, really short, because we only have half hour. There was a small swollen spot on her arm that ended up being a tumor between her bone and her muscle. Tumor was wrapped around her muscle. Took her to the pediatrician. She says, go straight to Texas Children's. Doctor, one after another. And finally, the doctor called on August 23rd and said, Mr. and Mrs. Barrett, I'm sorry, but your daughter has cancer. Obviously, the oxygen just sucked out of the room. It's like, this isn't real. Wake up. Come on, wake up. Kind of a thing. Especially when I'm battling fear and shame and guilt, and already on just life stuff and anxiety and being depressed. I was on medication at this time, and like I said, there's a time and a place for medicine when it comes to anxiety and depression, but by and large, I think that masks the symptoms or just treats the symptoms. I think I'm not a professional, but I think it's over-dispensed. For me, it numbed my emotions and it robbed me of my creativity, but it did set my mind in a space where I can begin to think. So I remember being on this medicine, and really, I had my emotions were just null and void. And Christina comes out of wakes up from her surgery, and she's groggy and crying, and my wife Melissa is crying, and I'm just like, I feel nothing. And I realized, okay, this isn't, something's not right here. But I had people in my life though that were speaking truth into me, and I think for me that the medicine helped me put me in a spot where I can begin to think better. And when I began to think better, and what I mean by thinking better is changing thought. So back in the 60s, psychologists called it cognitive behavioral therapy is what they discovered. The Apostle Paul wrote about it 2,000 years ago in Philippians 4. Be anxious for nothing, but in everything through prayer and thanksgiving, which is so huge, bring your request, make a request known to God. Then he says, and think on these things, whatever is true, whatever is noble, whatever is praiseworthy. But for me, I wasn't thinking on those things. I was thinking on the what ifs. The what ifs. Y'all have kids?
Yes, I do.
Then you battle what ifs.
All the
I
time.
guarantee you battle
Right
what ifs.
now, actually, in my head.
And when they get their
Happening.
driver's license, oh, buddy, you know,
Oh, I didn't even think about that.
Daddy, can I have the keys?
Don't think about it, James.
Oh man. You
Oh,
know.
man.
But that's crazy. What if this bad thing happens? What if that bad thing happens? So, I mean, we're creatures of habit, and we train our minds to think on the worst.
Yeah.
You know, and for a business leader, for an entrepreneur, well, what if this thing fails? How am I going to take care of my family? I cashed in all my 401k into this. Am I saving? I'm going to have absolutely nothing. And that happens to entrepreneurs all the time, you know. And so I was thinking, of course, with my daughter having this rare cancer, and her prognosis from the very start was very poor. And I remember thinking, well, what if my daughter dies? My family's going to be destroyed, and I already started being my own prophet, right? My family's going to be destroyed. I'm going to lose everything. I'm going to take my life. Life is going to be bad. Then I had people like my dad and God just placed a couple of other people in my life that just helped me think on truth and started identifying the lies. And so when I told you about those fear, shame, and guilt, that they had no faces, well, they do have a face, and it's my face. Because, you know, you are your greatest influence. You talk to yourself more than anybody else does. And we tell ourselves lies, you know. I'm not going to make it. It's going to be bad. I'm not worthy. I'm not good enough. I'm an imposter. All those sorts of things. And so with the what ifs, I remember thinking, well, I need to prepare myself for the worst. So that's why I'm thinking the worst. But how can a parent prepare himself for the death of his child? It's impossible. And then I started thinking, well, why try? What good is going to come out of this? And then I began to realize that there's something my dad told me, and I'll never forget this. We're having this conversation. Christine was still alive. We're having this conversation, and this particular conversation, and he said, I can tell you where I was. I was on Beltway 8 in Houston driving to work when having this conversation. He said, Chad, Jesus has never given you permission to worry about what may or may not happen tomorrow. He's given you grace to rest in today, and he promises grace for tomorrow, whatever it's going to be. So it was a process, and I started realizing I am telling myself to think about the worst. No one else is telling me to believe that. I'm telling myself to believe the worst, and it's making me miserable. Well, if I'm telling myself that I have to believe the worst, why can't I tell myself to believe the best? And the logical answer to that is, well, because what if the worst happens? Then what are you going to do?
Yeah.
But then there's the grace of Jesus that I'm living proof it is sufficient. And so I started believing the best, knowing that whatever the outcome is, Jesus' grace will be there. And it is. It always is. If my business folds, I'm going to be okay because Jesus' grace will be there. My family will be okay because Jesus' grace will be there. It's just, so either he's God or he's not. And it is sufficient.
I want to actually speak to something you said. It's a little off script, but last December I read a book. The title evades me right now, but it was a really great Christian author who speaks to the subject of anxiety. And there's a whole chapter area dedicated to the idea that the most influential voice in your life is your voice.
Yeah.
And it changed my world. Once I realized, I was like,
yeah,
he's right.
He is
like,
right.
Not only is it the most influential, but why is it the most influential? It's because you trust that voice more than any other voice.
Yeah.
Because it's yours.
Yeah.
You love your voice. That's
You
like your
know the
favorite.
motivations behind
it's your
it.
favorite voice, you know.
Yeah.
And I was like, that is incredibly powerful to realize that not only does that voice exist, but I love what you just said, because you get the opportunity to change what is being said because it is your voice and you have some control over that, and some speaking truths into those spaces. And then obviously, I mean, the voice that radiates truth to our core, of course, is the Word of God, Jesus, and
If we let it.
if we listen.
Yeah.
If we listen, if we know His voice, and we know the difference between His voice and our voice, and then of course all the other voices of the world that all come in around that. But since you mentioned that, I wanted to say something because I mean, how powerful is it to an entrepreneur? How many times that they hear their voice in their head telling them something that is fear, shame, guilt?
Yeah. Why
things.
believe the worst? Who says we have to believe the worst?
Yeah.
And so why not believe the best?
Yeah.
It's why I love skydiving.
That makes complete sense. That's great.
Why think about the worst when you can enjoy the best, right?
It's what well, besides the adrenaline rush and the.
By the way, I'm with you. I love skydiving.
Have you been?
Oh yeah, multiple times. But ever since I got married, Emily, my wife, I love her too much to go skydiving. So,
but it forces me to be put into a situation where I have to battle the what if. So,
yeah.
And of course, what is the biggest what if question in skydiving?
Are you gonna? Will my parachute open?
Will my parachute open?
Am I gonna die?
The one question.
Yeah, the one question. But then I start thinking on the truth instead. Okay, I know my emergency procedures. I've practiced them. I know my training will kick in. So I tell myself, this is going to be a great dive. This is going to be a fantastic dive.
Yeah.
And they get better and they get better and better. So it's good practice to put that in and to apply that to life.
I need to apply that to life whenever I go out into the ocean because all I think of is a shark's going to show up and it's going to eat me today. I don't know how surfers do it. It's because they have the positive attitude. I just don't have a positive enough attitude when I go get in the ocean, huh?
The way we introduced our girls to Jaws the other day.
Oh, that's terrible. I'm sorry.
Yeah.
They never want to go swim in the ocean again.
They'll be all right.
Oh gosh, they'll survive. They just may not enjoy the ocean ever again. It's okay.
This is just a movie. We're going to think about this instead. Anyway.
No, that's great. That's great. So moving along in that journey, I mean, you had 4 years to wrestle with that. Yeah. How soon after the diagnosis did you start to come to the realization of, hey, I can't just be planning for the worst the entire time?
It was probably just a few months before she died, where it was like a switch that was flipped, where so about 6 months before she died, we got this call. I was speaking at a event in Indiana, and I'm in my hotel room, and my phone rings, and it's an unknown, which is always the doctor. I was like, okay, and I know that we were waiting on results. So my doctor calls, and he says, Chad, are you sitting down? I was like, you sound excited. And he goes, no, I'm not going to sit down. You better tell me right now. Sorry. I'm just going to keep going on, okay? Yeah. He said the tumors are gone from her chest, from her lungs. Man, what a day, just incredible. And so, but then there's that roller coaster because 3 months later they came back with a vengeance. But there was that switch flipped. I never felt closer to Jesus than the days leading up to her death and the day of. I woke up every morning and I put my feet on the floor and I said, Jesus, thank you for this day. I mean, Thanksgiving does something amazing in our minds, in our hearts. It gets my mind off of my trauma and puts it on the God who is righteous and true and all powerful and loves me and loves my daughter more than I do and has my family in his hands. And so I would put my feet on the ground every morning and say, God, I thank you for whatever you're going to do today. And I remember doing that on June 21st, 2014. And she died 2 hours later. Yeah, I've told this story thousands of times, and there's times that I don't get choked up, and there's times that I do, and I can't tell you which is which, and I just don't care anymore. But I knew my life was beginning to change when I started becoming more And this seems so counter intuitive when I begin to be more thankful for what I see God doing in my family. You know, we told Christina that the cancer came back and there's nothing else the doctors can do. And y'all, I watched my daughter stare death in the eyes and said, I'm ready.
Wow.
Wow.
Yeah. So it was it was a turning point in realizing that I truly have nothing to fear. And now I've experienced a parent's worst nightmare. Yeah, I grieve, but I'm more than okay. That's why the title of the book I wrote, shameless plug, the book.
No. Don't be afraid.
The
I want
title
you
of the
to.
book I wrote is Thrive, Not Just Survive. So I used to think of, that verse in 2 Corinthians 12 where Paul says, this thorn in the side, I pleaded with Jesus over and over and over again. Please take this thorn out of my side. And basically, here's Chad Barrett's paraphrase. Jesus says, no, I'm not.
Yeah.
I love you too much. Because you will not experience my grace on you if you lived a life of comfort. But because you're going to sense my grace and you're going to see that my grace is sufficient. And I used to think my grace is sufficient. Remember that stormy ocean I would drown in? It was just enough grace to get a little gulp of oxygen before I sink down. And then I started realizing, well, what kind of grace is that? And I tell you now that His grace is sufficient to not to wallow in a stormy ocean, but to walk on the water. And so that it's sufficient for me to not just survive, but to thrive in life. And thriving doesn't mean an absence of pain. It means I'm gonna climb this mountain. I'm gonna reach the summit. I'm gonna take it one step at a time, and Jesus is there every step of the way with me. And,
Man. So there's so much application in that.
Yeah.
I mean, you've obviously applied it in your own life, and thank you for sharing your story. I cannot imagine what it takes to dredge up those feelings again every time, but I'm sure that they're bittersweet. And so I thank you for being vulnerable. So when you're thinking about, all right, how does this apply in my daily life? Like how, obviously you've been changed dramatically by God's grace through those trials. And James and I can attest both on an individual basis, like trials make you better. Trials are good for you. And it's hard to see that when you're in the middle of them, but they're God's grace. They're God's grace. If you never went through trials in life, then you would never realize your need for God. And so when you're thinking about just how can a leader who is experiencing trials, whether it's something as dramatic as facing the loss of your child, your beloved child, or if it's something as simple as, hey, I've been working hard hours for years, and I feel like I'm just not making any ground. I feel like I'm in the same place I was 2 years ago, 5 years ago, 20 years ago. How do they face that with hope? How do they face that when they don't seem to feel anything different?
yeah, it's hard.
Yeah.
It's and that's why my heart. I love entrepreneurship. I love small business owners. Who against all odds they just keep stepping in, and there's that sense of that where that fear and that shame and guilt begins to kick in. One of the biggest principles that I've learned and am learning in my life are called NGU, never give up, and it's not something that I can do on my own. It's something that I need others to do with me, and it's when I think of an entrepreneur who's been, like you said, has been struggling for years and not seeking to make any headway, this looks like a giant mountain that I'm not sure if I can climb the whole thing. And and with my story with Christina and overcoming anxiety and depression, looked like a huge mountain. I don't know what the summit's going to look like. What's my future going to look like? What's it going to be like? And for me, I keep going back to what is it I'm telling myself. You know, there's been times as a pastor I tell myself that I'm just not cut out for this. You know, and I have to recognize this. That's just the struggle of being a pastor. That's part of being an entrepreneur. Is you're going to have days where you feel this way, and you have to tell yourself the truth. It's okay to feel this way. It's okay that there is a struggle. It's okay that there is a challenge, because a challenge is how you grow. But challenges are best overcome with a team and not as an individual. And in my life, I had to have people who surrounded me, who spoke truth into me and encouraged me to persevere, to not give up. When I think of a mountain, when I climbed Mount Hood back in 2016, and the summit was not what we thought it would be. It was storming in the middle of June, and our water bottles froze up. But looking at the summit, and we couldn't even see it because of the clouds and all of that, I thought at first, how am I going to get to that? But I thought, okay, I don't know about that, but I know I can get to this rock here. It's 10 meters ahead of me. And me and my friend Steve were climbing this ice wall, basically, 50-mile-an-hour winds. And we were roped up, and we'd just go like a slinky. We would just go 10 meters at a time, 10 meters at a time. And that's the encouragement that I want to offer to those entrepreneurs and business leaders who are struggling like that. Take it one day at a time. What can you do to accomplish tomorrow? Not the next 10 years. What can you do to better yourself for tomorrow? And that's how you persevere. That's how you never give up. There's 2 words that are not allowed in my house. It's, I can't. I just haven't figured it out yet. And it's okay that I haven't figured it out. But if I have a team that is helping me, and we trust each other, and I can take tomorrow. I can accomplish one small thing tomorrow. And that's just one of the. That sounds small, but that's a huge thing for me, and it's a huge thing for a lot of people. You break it down into chunks, and you accomplish one thing at a time. And after a while, you look back and you see how far up the mountain you've come.
It's powerful.
You are a very resilient man, Chad.
Well,
here's my question for you about that, because when I think about the word resilient, a lot of times people think like fighter, and it's like you can just bulge through anything. But you seem through everything you're telling me is you've had a grace for yourself that's very unique. In the same, like I feel like sometimes people they're really resilient, they get hard inside. Like in the inside, they get hard. Whether they've been betrayed by people, whether they've been they just for themselves the shame and the fear and the guilt just is so loud for them. They just shut down and close up, But from everything I'm hearing about your story, you kind of allowed the Lord to flow through you and bring. You called it like a daily grace. I think it was earlier. You were talking about how it's like each day, what your dad said, the grace for today and the grace for tomorrow. Can you talk about that a little bit in regards to like just encouraging the people who are listening, their leaders, and their like, how do you allow that to flow through you when you feel like you can't give yourself grace? How do you start to begin to let that radiate through you in life?
Resiliency can be misconstrued as putting up defenses.
Yeah.
A person can. I mean, you can look at me and say, "Chad, you're really strong," and I might just be, putting up defenses. The problem is if I have my defenses up, then I'm focusing on one person, and that's me. And I will focus on me at the cost of you if it comes to that. And I know what putting up defenses feels like. But there's a difference. There's a difference in defenses and setting up boundaries, and we don't need to go there.
That's another
episode.
That's another book.
Next season.
Right. But it's telling myself that it's okay that I'm struggling today. Instead of the lie, telling myself I should be stronger than this. I should know the answer to this. I'm a leader. I own this business. They're coming to me for help. Sure. I should know how to solve their problems. But it's okay to say I don't know how to do that yet. Yeah. And it's okay to have that feeling of wow, I'm scared. But how you process that fear is vital. Yeah. There's a there's a book by Patrick Lencioni called The Advantage, and it's a wonderful book, and I love the guy. And in it, he talks about how to build a cohesive team, and he calls it building a vulnerable based trust with each other. And I think it is one of the healthiest things that a leader can do is when he's vulnerable with his people. Because that champions that building that trust, and they could become vulnerable with him. And so vulnerability allows, it's me taking off my mask and saying, yeah, I'm struggling with this too, but it's okay, and we're going to get through this together. And tomorrow we're not going to fall. And if tomorrow looks bleak, we're going to get through the tomorrow together, and we're going to be okay. Especially in time of crisis. You mentioned the ocean. One of the times I thought I would die in my life, I was 60 miles out in the Gulf of Mexico fishing on a 22-foot cabin cruiser, 7 people. And we got caught in a storm, lightning popping everywhere. And I'm holding on to a metal pole so I won't fall out of the boat, And I remember thinking, this can be bad. I'm going to die. I really got scared when the owner of the boat said the exact same thing. This is bad. I think we're going to die. This is horrible. It was like, oh my gosh, then it's true. Yeah. But I guarantee you, if the leader would have said, hey guys, I know this is scary. I'm scared too, but we're going to get through this. It's going to be okay. That's the leader people will follow.
Yeah.
And that sets a tone. That sets an atmosphere. So the leader has to be self-aware of, I know my own fears, but I know we're going to get through this. Even if I don't know how, I know we're going to get through this. We'll figure this out together. I hope that answers the question.
It does. Incredible. I grew up around so many. I mean, people listening. I'm sure they're pastors. And I grew up around a lot of pastors, and it's so hard to be vulnerable with the people around you and the leadership. So you saying these things is just. It's enlightening, and I'm just so thankful for it because it needs to be heard. And I hope people, when they hear this, I hope people are sharing this episode to saying, this is the good way. I mean, think about Jesus and how vulnerable he was with his disciples. Like, it is foundational to you making it as a leader. I mean, people don't look at pastors and think entrepreneur. What do you think a church starter is? That boy's an entrepreneur. Yeah. And he's a soul carer too, and that is hard, and even those who've been doing it for 20 years, it is hard to remain in a place of grace and vulnerability with other people, whether it's in business with leadership teams or in work with fellow elders. It's a hard place to stay because you can quickly harden, and then still have that mindset to be the leader and say, I don't know how. But I think we're going to make it through. Well,
there's times a leader has to say the hard things. Yeah. Jesus told his disciples, I'm going to die. I'm not going to be here soon. They would, no, I would never. We're not going to let that happen. Well, get behind me, Satan. But I have to, because here's the good that comes after that. Yeah. So there's times where, as a leader, I have to say the hard things. But just because I have to say the hard things doesn't mean it's going to be detrimental to us as people, or it's going to be the worst, and it's going to destroy us. Yeah, we're still going to be okay.
No, that's great. That's great, Chad. I feel like we could talk for hours.
I know,
and I'm so sad that we're at time. But I really do appreciate you taking the time to join us today on Good Business. I'm so encouraged. My heart is full,
glad.
And. Man, I feel like you were talking directly to me half the time, but yeah, thank you so much. So, Chad, you've got a book. How can people get it? And tell us about the book. I know you already gave us a little overview, but can you tell people about your book?
Yeah, the book. I'm a storyteller. The book is written in story form, and basically it says what I said in a nutshell: how my life was ridden by anxiety and depression. It tells the story of Christina and her cancer journey. I equate it with climbing a mountain. And what that's like. And we don't know what the summit for Christina was. We don't know what the summit of Mount Hood was. But how Jesus is the center of it, and how it changed my life. My worst fear of losing a child came true, but my worst fears of my family being destroyed because it did not come true. I'm living proof that His grace is sufficient. The second part of the book are 5 disciplines that I learned through this process, and so those 5 disciplines are written out there that everybody could go through, and the purpose of those is part of those disciplines is to frame your story and multiply yourself to help somebody else in their struggle. They can find it on Amazon. If you just type in Thrive, not just Survive, it's the first one that pops up.
Awesome.
Yeah. But they can go to chadbarrett.us as well.
Awesome. Now, just to not to confuse you with the other Chad Barrett that pops on Google.
Not chadbarrett.com.
Yeah, not
I think he's a soccer player.
Not the soccer player.
I don't play soccer. I tried one time.
Awesome.
It didn't work
Well, thank you, Chad. And everybody, thank you so much for tuning in today. I hope you were encouraged. I encourage you to share this episode with people who you think would also be encouraged by this. And we look forward to seeing you guys next time. Don't forget to hit the like button, subscribe on YouTube if you're watching, and be sure to leave us a 5-star on Apple Podcast and wherever you are enjoying your podcast today. So guys, thanks again for being on Good Business with us, and we'll see you next time.